It begins in the stillness of night, not a silence of emptiness, but one that hums with an ancient pulse. The wind carries a faint music through the plains of Madhya Pradesh, a melody of dust, time, and stone. The stars, distant and unmoving, watch over a landscape that has witnessed empires rise and crumble to dust. And there, beneath their silver gaze, stand the temples of Khajuraho, carved not only from sandstone, but from the breath of gods, the longing of mortals, and the secret of creation itself. The first traveler arrives alone, torch flickering against the walls of the past. He looks up and freezes. Before him, on every surface, every lintel, every spire, are bodies. Lovers entwined in impossible unions. Women with serene faces arching toward the sky. Men and gods merging in passion and play. It is as though the stone itself had fallen into a dream of desire and never awoken. The air is heavy with something ancient, not lust, not blasphemy, but an understanding deeper than both. He steps closer, and the carvings seem to breathe. They say that at Khajuraho, the gods remember what humanity forgot. Each figure, each curve, is a syllable in a lost language, a script of body and spirit, of earth and cosmos. For these temples were not built merely to house gods, they were built to remind the soul of its own divinity, to show that creation itself is the act of union. What Western eyes once called obscene, the ancients saw as sacred geometry, the mathematics of life clothed in human form. The traveler walks deeper into the temple complex. He feels watched, not by eyes of judgment, but by presence, as if thousands of silent witnesses still linger in the air. In the faint moonlight, the sculptures seem alive. The curve of a hip glistens, the shadow of an arm moves across the wall, a face half broken by time smiles knowingly, as though it remembers a secret he has yet to learn. The torchlight dances, and with it, the past begins to speak. Khajuraho was built over 1,000 years ago by the Chandala dynasty, a lineage of warrior kings who believed that divinity must be celebrated in all its forms. Between the 9th and 11th centuries, under their reign, 85 temples rose from the dust, each an offering to the divine principle of life, each carved in devotion, not in shame. Today, only 25 survive, but within them lives a philosophy so vast it defies translation. To walk among them is to step not into history, but into the dream of an age when gods walked as humans and humans reached toward the divine through ecstasy. The traveler sets his torch in the ground and closes his eyes. The hum of the night grows louder. It is said that the temples whisper, not in sound, but in vibration. The stones remember touch, the sculptors chisel, the rhythm of creation. And in that vibration lies the key to understanding why these sacred walls are covered in the dance of eroticism. For in ancient India, there was no division between body and spirit, between desire and devotion. To know the divine was to know oneself entirely, to embrace the flesh as a vessel of the soul. In the philosophy of the ancients, the cosmos itself was born of union, Shiva and Shakti, consciousness and energy, the still and the moving. Their eternal embrace gave rise to everything, time, matter, thought, and being. Every act of creation, from the birth of a star to the breath of a newborn, was but a reflection of that cosmic love. The carvings of Khajuraho are not depictions of human passion, but of this universal act, the sacred fusion of opposites that sustains existence. The traveler opens his eyes again and looks around. The figures seem endless. Some are playful, lovers teasing, women gazing into mirrors, men in the art of seduction. Others are fierce, warriors intertwined with celestial beings, animals joining in symbolic union. And yet, all of it is balanced, ordered, deliberate. Nothing here is random. The architects of these temples followed the rules of the Shilpa Shastras, ancient texts that prescribed the geometry of the sacred. The erotic scenes, though a fraction of the carvings, are placed with purpose, often on the outer walls, for they represent the external world, the realm of illusion and experience, which one must transcend to reach the inner sanctum, the formless divine within. But to reach the inner sanctum, one must pass through the realm of desire. To renounce, one must first understand. That was the wisdom the ancients held, that suppression breeds ignorance, while awareness brings transcendence. To deny desire was not to purify the soul, but to starve it of understanding. Thus, the outer walls teemed with life, lovers, dancers, gods in union, all celebrating the vast theater of existence. Only after witnessing this dance could one enter the silent sanctum, where no image remained, only the stillness of the divine. From the sensual to the spiritual, from the body to the soul, that was the pilgrimage the temple demanded. The traveler kneels. The wind sighs through the corridors of stone. Somewhere, an owl cries. The night grows thick with unseen memory. In this moment, he realizes, the question is not why these temples are covered in sex, but why we have forgotten that sex was once sacred. The carvings are not acts of obscenity, they are prayers in motion, reminders that divinity and desire were never enemies. The human body was a temple, and the act of love, when done in awareness, was the ritual that mirrored the creation of the universe. He walks onward, tracing his fingers along the stone. Each groove is a word in an unwritten scripture. Here, a woman bends backward, her face lifted toward a god's embrace. There, a man kneels in devotion, his hands pressed against a goddess's thigh as though worshipping the earth itself. The carvings are not pornographic, they are poetic. They speak not of pleasure for its own sake, but of surrender, the surrender of ego, of separation, of illusion. In the moment of union, the boundaries between self and other dissolve, and what remains is the infinite. And yet, as centuries passed, this understanding faded. Empires changed, invaders came and went, and with them came new eyes, eyes that could not see the sacred in the sensual. When the British arrived, they saw only filth. The same carvings that once taught philosophy were now labeled obscene, indecent, savage. The temples were closed, shamed, their stories buried under the weight of moral judgment. What had once been enlightenment became embarrassment. But the stones did not forget. They waited. The traveler senses this patience, an unbroken watchfulness. Even as the world changed, the temples stood as silent witnesses to humanity's evolving shame and rediscovery. He feels as though they are not monuments, but living archives, each figure an emissary of forgotten wisdom. The sculptors of old did not carve these images for titillation, they carved them as spiritual maps. Each position, gesture, and glance was symbolic, a code for the alignment of energies, the awakening of the Kundalini, the ascent from base desire to cosmic consciousness. In these carvings, the body is both the question and the answer. He steps into the main sanctum. The torchlight dims. Inside, it is almost entirely bare, a striking contrast to the outer walls. Only a single lingam stands at the center, bathed in shadow and silence. The lingam, symbol of Shiva, rises from the yoni, symbol of Shakti. Together, they represent the cosmic union, the eternal creation of existence. Here, the sensual finds its ultimate expression as the spiritual. What was carved outside finds completion within. The journey of the pilgrim, from the chaos of the senses to the stillness of being, ends in this union. The traveler kneels before the lingam and closes his eyes again. The hum of the universe seems to echo in his chest. He sees, not with eyes, but with memory, a memory that belongs not to him, but to all who have ever lived. He sees the sculptors chiseling by torchlight, chanting hymns as they carve the divine embrace. He sees the kings and queens who commissioned the temples, believing that the depiction of union would bless their land with fertility and peace. He sees monks walking barefoot through the temple corridors, whispering to disciples that desire, when understood, is a doorway, not a sin. The whisper of Khajuraho deepens. It speaks not only of India, but of humanity, of our eternal conflict between body and spirit. For centuries, we have divided what was once whole, worshipping the divine while condemning the very energy that gives us life. The temples stand as reminders of the time before the split, when the sacred was not separated from the sensual, when the divine feminine was not hidden, when the act of love was a meditation, not a secret. The traveler opens his eyes one last time. Dawn is approaching, pale and slow. The light touches the carvings, and for a moment, the figures seem to move. The goddesses smile again. The lovers glimmer. The walls breathe. The world begins anew. As the traveler walks away, the temples recede into the haze, silent again, patient again, waiting for another soul to listen. Khajuraho does not demand understanding, it invites surrender. It does not shock, it reveals. It whispers to those who can hear that creation itself is an act of love, that the divine is not separate from desire, and that the true obscenity is forgetting that union is the essence of existence. Beneath the dust of centuries, beneath the judgments of empires, the stones still hum the same mantra. In the beginning, there was union, and in union, all things were born. The traveler turns one last time. The temple towers rise into the sky, their peaks catching the first light of morning. It is said that those who look upon them at dawn see not stone, but flame, the eternal fire of creation burning within every living thing. And so, as the world wakes and the mystery fades into daylight, Khajuraho continues to dream. A dream of bodies and souls, of gods and mortals, of the endless embrace that gave birth to the stars. There is a silence that only stone can speak. It does not use words, yet it holds the weight of centuries in its surface. If you listen closely, the walls of ancient temples murmur in a language older than any scripture, a language written not in ink, but in curve, rhythm, and form. This is the language of stone, and nowhere does it speak more clearly than in the temples of India. The sun rises over the plains of central India. The air is soft, the color of honey and dust. A light mist drapes itself over the carvings of Khajuraho, and for a fleeting moment, the figures seem to exhale. Lovers stretch from their sleep in eternal embrace, apsaras tilt their chins toward the east, and the gods themselves shimmer in the pale dawn. Each motion is frozen, yet alive, as if time itself paused to admire the beauty of its own creation. The stone does not lie. It remembers the touch of the sculptor, the slow, deliberate chisel strokes that carried the rhythm of devotion. Each curve was carved with intention, every detail chosen to reveal something hidden beneath the surface. The artisans of Khajuraho were not mere craftsmen, they were initiates in an ancient art, one that fused geometry with mysticism, architecture with consciousness. To them, carving was prayer. To build a temple was to build a universe. In the philosophy of Vasta Shastra and Shilpa Shastra, a temple was conceived as a cosmic diagram, the mandala made manifest in stone. Its foundation mirrored the structure of the cosmos, the square base, symbolizing the earth, the ascending towers, reaching toward the heavens, and the sanctum, the womb of creation where the divine resides. Every sculpture adorning its walls, every line of symmetry, was designed to guide the pilgrim's consciousness from the external to the internal, from the sensory to the transcendental. The erotic carvings, scattered like jewels across the surface, were not embellishments. They were teachings. The human form, in all its beauty and vulnerability, was seen as a mirror of the universe. The ancients believed that what existed in the cosmos also existed within the body, the microcosm reflecting the macrocosm. In the movements of lovers, they saw the dance of Shiva and Shakti, the union of consciousness and energy that sustains all things. Every caress, every gaze, was symbolic of creation itself. To look upon these carvings was to contemplate the nature of existence, not through denial, but through revelation. The temple walls are not random scenes of pleasure, they are sequences, carefully arranged narratives. The pilgrim who walks clockwise around the temple, following the path of circumambulation, witnesses the unfolding of human life in symbolic stages, from innocence to desire, from passion to transcendence. The figures begin as dancers, musicians, and lovers, full of movement and vitality. As one progresses, the imagery shifts, the figures grow calmer, their gestures more meditative, until finally, at the heart of the temple, form dissolves into stillness. This is not art for the eyes alone, it is architecture for the soul. At Khajuraho, the sculptors carve not only the sacred and sensual but the entire panorama of existence. You will find scenes of laughter, of domestic life, of play and battle. You will see dancers in mid-motion, celestial beings with wings, and yogis in meditation. Even animals participate in this grand celebration of life. Nothing was excluded, because nothing was deemed unworthy of the divine. The erotic scenes, perhaps 10% of the total carvings, were simply one thread in this tapestry, representing one stage of the soul's journey. The ancients understood that desire is not the enemy of enlightenment, but its beginning. It is the spark that leads one inward, from longing to understanding, from possession to surrender. The traveler, standing before one of these walls, begins to see patterns hidden within the stone. The placement of the lovers is never arbitrary. Each pair, each posture, aligns with the temple's geometry, with the flow of cosmic energy, the prana that moves through all things. The ancients believed that the human body was a conduit of this energy, a sacred vessel through which the divine expresses itself. By depicting union, they were not celebrating physical pleasure, but the harmony of opposites. The left and right, male and female, sun and moon, when joined, they create balance. The carvings are meditations on wholeness. Imagine, for a moment, the sculptor at work 1,000 years ago. His chisel moves with the rhythm of mantra. Each strike is a heartbeat, each curve a breath. He is not carving stone, he is awakening it. The figures emerge slowly, their bodies curving out of the rock as if remembering themselves. To carve the divine was an act of meditation, the sculptor entering trance, merging his will with the form he shapes. The erotic scenes, to him, were not fantasies but revelations, glimpses of the unity that lies beyond duality. To carve the lovers was to carve the cosmos in miniature. And yet, the question remains, why this openness, this fearless embrace of the sensual? Why did ancient India, a land so deeply spiritual, choose to adorn its holiest sanctuaries with scenes of desire? The answer lies not in the body, but in the philosophy of Tantra. To the tantric mind, the path to the divine is not through rejection of life, but through its complete experience. Every sense, every emotion, every act of love can become a door to the infinite, if approached in awareness. The temple, therefore, is not a place of withdrawal, but of remembrance, a reminder that the divine exists within the flesh as much as beyond it. The carvings invite the pilgrim to confront desire without fear, to look upon it not as sin but as shadow, something to be seen, understood, and transcended. In the tantric worldview, energy must flow, suppression leads to distortion. By acknowledging the erotic, the temples restore balance between the physical and the spiritual. The lovers carved in stone are not objects of temptation, but mirrors, reflecting the same energy that, when purified through awareness, becomes devotion. It is the same current that rises as Kundalini, the serpent energy coiled at the base of the spine, ascending toward enlightenment. The traveler feels this understanding begin to stir within him. As he gazes upon the carvings, he senses that they are not separate from him. The stone bodies seem to pulse with the same rhythm as his heartbeat. Their stillness vibrates with life. For the first time, he realizes that the temple is not a monument to gods, but a reflection of the human soul, its beauty, its contradictions, its yearning for unity. The erotic carvings are not meant to be observed from a distance, they are invitations to see oneself. He walks slowly along the outer walls, tracing the path that countless pilgrims once took. The sequence unfolds like a story: birth, life, desire, transcendence. Each turn of the corridor feels like turning a page in a cosmic scripture. In one panel, he sees a group of musicians playing instruments of joy; in another, lovers entwined beneath the gaze of a goddess; in another, ascetics meditating in stillness. Life and renunciation, pleasure and peace, all coexist, equal and sacred. This, he realizes, is the balance of the Purusharthas, the four aims of life: dharma, duty; artha, prosperity; kama, desire; and moksha, liberation. To live fully, one must honor them all. For the ancients, kama, desire, was not separate from dharma or moksha. It was one path among many toward the realization of truth. The temples of Khajuraho, Konark, and others like them were expressions of this harmony. They were not places of sin, but sanctuaries of wisdom. To walk their halls was to journey through the self, through passion, love, longing, and, finally, peace. The body was not an obstacle, it was the bridge. The traveler pauses before a particularly intricate carving: a woman, her body poised in graceful curve, one hand resting on her hip, the other adjusting her anklet. Her face is calm, serene, filled with a quiet power. Around her, celestial attendants fan her with lotus leaves. This is no depiction of submission, it is sovereignty. The feminine here is divine, not to be possessed, but revered. The goddess Shakti, in her many forms, inhabits every woman, every curve, every movement. In her lies the energy of the universe, dynamic, creative, boundless. To unite with her, whether in ritual or in love, is to touch the infinite. The traveler feels the weight of this realization. The carvings of Khajuraho do not objectify, they sanctify. They honor the feminine as equal, as essential, as divine. In a world that often hides its sensuality behind shame, these ancient stones remind us that to revere the goddess is to revere life itself. Desire, in its purest form, is not greed, it is devotion. It is the yearning of the finite for the infinite, the call of the soul to return to its source. As the traveler continues, the light begins to shift. The sun climbs higher, casting long shadows that move across the carvings like liquid time. The faces of the gods glow, then darken, then glow again. It is as if the entire temple breathes with the rhythm of the day. He realizes that these walls were designed not only to capture light, but to move with it, the play of shadow upon stone mirroring the play of duality within consciousness. Night and day, passion and peace, body and spirit, all are one continuum, eternally cycling. He reaches a corner where two walls meet, one facing east, one facing north. The carvings here are among the most detailed. Lovers in embrace, celestial beings hovering above, musicians playing drums and flutes. It feels as if the entire universe has gathered to witness the dance of creation. The traveler closes his eyes and breathes. He feels the air vibrating with something ancient, something eternal. It is not the weight of the past, but the presence of the eternal now, the same energy that once moved through the sculptor's hand, through the lover's breath, through the pilgrim's prayer. In that moment, the traveler understands, these temples were never about sex. They were about life, the totality of it, unbroken and whole. The erotic carvings are the language of existence itself, spoken in the alphabet of form and flesh. They remind us that the divine is not elsewhere, not above or beyond, but here, in the pulse of the body, in the rhythm of breath, in the meeting of two souls. The language of stone speaks softly, but its message endures, that to live is to love, and to love is to remember the divine within all things. And as the day deepens, and the temple glows beneath the blazing sun, the traveler stands still, listening to the whispering stone. Somewhere within its silence, he hears it say, "To know me, you must know yourself. To see the divine, you must first look with eyes unafraid of desire." The day drifts slowly over the ancient temples, as though time itself hesitates to pass. The traveler lingers at the threshold, where shadow meets sunlight, and the scent of dust mingles with the faint aroma of incense left behind by unseen worshippers. The stillness of Khajuraho feels alive, not empty, but filled with invisible presence, as if the air itself carries memory. In the silence, one can almost hear the chisels striking, the murmurs of artisans chanting under their breath, the echo of prayers that once rose toward the sky like smoke. And so, the traveler continues, tracing the circular path around the temple's body, its living body of stone. With each step, the carvings shift. Here, a goddess smiles with the serenity of creation, there, a figure arches backward in ecstatic surrender. The walls seem to breathe, contracting and expanding, as though the temple itself were a great organism, inhaling devotion, exhaling wisdom. In this rhythm, the traveler senses something profound, that the temple is not built to depict the divine, but to embody it. It is a map of the cosmos, and the human soul is its key. The ancients believed that the divine resided not only in heaven, but within the geometry of life itself. A temple was a living diagram, the universe condensed into structure and form. Its spire, or shikara, reached toward the heavens like a flame, symbolizing the aspiration of the soul. Its base mirrored the earth, steady and grounded. And between these two, earth and sky, danced the carvings of human experience. The erotic figures that astonished the modern eye were never intended as profane. They were expressions of the great cosmic principle, that the same energy which gives birth to desire also gives birth to creation. Desire, in Sanskrit, is kama, not a sin, but one of life's four sacred aims. It is the power of attraction that pulls the universe into being, the pulse that drives seed to sprout, the wind that carries life into new form. Without kama, nothing would move, nothing would be born. To reject it, therefore, was to reject life itself. The ancients saw no contradiction between kama and moksha, between desire and liberation, because they understood that both were part of the same continuum. The path of one led to the other, when walked in awareness. This understanding is etched into the very placement of the carvings. On the outer walls, the lovers. Inside, the gods. Deeper still, the silence. The journey of the pilgrim mirrors the journey of the soul, from outward longing to inward stillness. To walk the temple is to walk the map of the human condition, from body to spirit, from multiplicity to unity. What seems erotic is, in truth, instruction. The scenes of union are visual mantras, reminding the seeker that the merging of male and female, of Shiva and Shakti, is the essence of cosmic harmony. The traveler stands before one such carving, two figures entwined, their forms both tender and powerful. Their faces are calm, their eyes half closed, not in lust but in meditation. Around them, attendants, musicians, and divine beings watch in quiet reverence. The composition is not chaotic but balanced, symmetrical, almost geometric. Every angle, every curve, aligns with the sacred mathematics of the mandala. The traveler realizes that what he is seeing is not a scene of passion, but of creation itself, the eternal moment when consciousness meets energy, when stillness meets movement, when Shiva meets Shakti. He steps back, gazing upward at the rising tower. The figures climb toward the sky, arranged in ascending tiers, from the playful to the serene, from the worldly to the divine. It is as if the temple itself is a ladder of transformation. At the base, the human, at the peak, the God. The carvings lead the eye, and the soul, upward, teaching without words, revealing without scripture. The stone becomes a teacher, silent yet eternal, whispering through form what cannot be said through sound. The traveler recalls that the temples were built not as monuments of worship alone, but as centers of learning, universities of the spirit. Here, philosophy, art, music, and science were united in the same purpose, to awaken awareness. The sculptors, known as shilpins, followed texts that guided not only the technical proportions of form but the metaphysical symbolism behind each gesture. The position of a hand, the tilt of a head, the curve of a hip, each carried meaning. A raised hand might signify blessing, an open palm, offering, the joining of limbs, the merging of principles. What appears sensual to modern eyes was, to them, sacred geometry given life. In the dim corridors of memory, one can imagine these artisans at work, their bodies bent in concentration, their minds aligned with mantra. They carved not to decorate, but to consecrate. Each blow of the chisel was an invocation, each curve, a hymn. The very act of creation was itself an offering to the divine. In this, they mirrored the gods they depicted, creators giving form to formlessness. Their devotion was not in denial, but in embodiment. They did not seek to escape the world, but to sanctify it. The traveler moves deeper into the temple grounds. The light changes, now filtered, golden, almost liquid. The figures glow as though lit from within. He feels that the temple is not built around him, but inside him. The carvings reflect his own consciousness, the desires he has feared, the joys he has forgotten, the serenity he seeks. The temple becomes a mirror, showing him not what he wishes to see, but what he truly is. And in that reflection, he glimpses something vast, the realization that all opposites, all conflicts, exist only to reveal unity. The language of stone, once alien, begins to make sense. The traveler hears it in the rhythm of his own breath. The carvings are not obscene, he understands now, they are a form of scripture, agamas written in body instead of word. To the ancients, the body was the first temple, the dwelling place of the divine. The pulse of life that moves through veins is the same that moves through stars. In the embrace of lovers, they saw not indulgence but the echo of the original creation, when the one became two, and the two became all. The sculptors encoded this truth in stone so that it would never be forgotten, even if the words faded. They knew that kingdoms fall, languages die, but form endures. Stone would outlast memory, and within its silence, the secret would remain, waiting for those who could listen. As dusk approaches, the traveler finds himself before the great Lakshmana temple, one of Khajuraho's most ornate sanctuaries. Its outer walls teem with life, gods, dancers, warriors, beasts, lovers, all spiraling around the tower in endless procession. The traveler follows them, circling slowly, feeling as though he walks through the body of time itself. Each figure seems to turn toward him, each gaze meeting his in silent acknowledgement. They are not merely carved forms, they are presences. At one corner, he stops. Before him, a sequence unfolds like a story. First, a group of musicians, then, a couple in embrace, then, a figure meditating in stillness. The message is clear, life begins in rhythm, moves through union, and ends in peace. The carvings are not isolated acts of art, but parts of a living narrative, a cosmic dance frozen in mid-motion. The entire temple is a choreography of being, one that leads the pilgrim from movement to stillness, from multiplicity to one. And as the traveler watches, he senses that the boundary between art and reality is dissolving. The carvings no longer seem separate from the air, or from him. They pulse with the same vitality that runs through his veins. The temple, the traveler, and the world become one continuum of existence. It is a feeling beyond understanding, the same awe that the ancients must have felt when they stood before their creation, knowing they had captured eternity in stone. Night descends slowly, cloaking the temple in indigo and gold. The stars emerge, reflected faintly in the polished faces of the gods. The traveler lies on the cool stone floor, eyes half closed, breathing with the rhythm of the earth. He feels the hum beneath him, deep, resonant, unending. It is the voice of the temple, the murmur of creation itself. It says nothing new, yet everything that has ever been known. He understands now why the temples are covered in such carvings. They were never meant to shock, but to awaken. They speak in the oldest language, the language of life, of desire, of union. In them, the ancients left a message, that the divine does not exist apart from the human, that the sacred cannot be separated from the sensual, that to seek enlightenment is not to reject the body, but to see through it into eternity. The traveler rises as the night deepens. The wind moves through the corridors like a sigh. The figures on the walls glow faintly in the moonlight, alive in their eternal stillness. He bows before them, not in worship, but in understanding. The whisper of the stone lingers in his mind as he walks away, a mantra without words. What you call desire, we called creation. What you call shame, we called truth. What you fear, we sanctified. And somewhere in the darkness, the temple dreams, a dream of light and shadow, of bodies and souls, of the endless dance that gave birth to the stars. There is a rhythm beneath the skin of the world, a pulse that beats within every atom, every breath, every heartbeat. The ancients called it Shakti, the living current of existence. It flows through rivers and stars, through thought and silence, through the body and the infinite. And at the still center of this flow stands Shiva, consciousness itself, the unmoving witness. Between them unfolds all of creation, the eternal dance of energy and awareness, of motion and stillness, of the seen and the unseen. Tantra was born from this understanding, that everything in the universe, from the whisper of wind to the stirring of desire, is an expression of this divine union. It is not a religion of denial, but of remembrance. Its path does not lead away from the world, but through it. The body, the senses, the breath, all are sacred instruments through which the soul learns to recognize itself. To the tantric sage, the human being is not a fragment seeking wholeness, but wholeness temporarily veiled in form. The traveler stands again in the courtyard of the ancient temple, the air warm with the scent of earth and rain. The carvings that once seemed sensual now appear as cosmic diagrams, their bodies aligned with invisible geometry. He begins to see that they are not depictions of human passion, but metaphors of the sacred equation, the eternal balance between Shiva and Shakti. To the unseeing eye, they are lovers. To the awakened, they are galaxies merging. Tantra teaches that the universe itself is a living mandala, a circle of endless creation. Every being, every thought, every star, turns within this circle, propelled by the same force that moves the tides and quickens the seed. That force is desire, not desire for possession, but for union, for return. Every motion in nature is a longing to reunite with its source. The flame rises to the sky because it remembers the sun. The river runs to the sea because it remembers its beginning. The soul moves through lifetimes because it remembers the one. To the tantric mind, the body is the first temple, the earth the second, and the universe the third. Each mirrors the other. The chakras, the energy centers within the subtle body, are reflections of cosmic order. At the base of the spine sleeps the kundalini, the coiled energy, the serpent of awakening. When stirred, she rises upward, passing through the 7 gates of consciousness, each a petal of the inner lotus. Her ascent is not a journey of lust, but of illumination, the merging of matter and spirit, of energy and awareness. The traveler sits upon the cool stone floor, his eyes closed, his breath deepening. In his stillness, he begins to sense this current within himself, faint, like the hum of distant bees. It is not confined to the body, it extends beyond it, connecting him to the rhythm of the earth, the pulse of the temple, the vibration of the air. The separation between inner and outer begins to dissolve. He realizes that the same energy that carved the lovers into stone is moving through his own veins, whispering the same ancient truth. There is no division between the sacred and the sensual, between the body and the cosmos. In the earliest tantric texts, the universe is described not as created by a god, but as God becoming aware of itself. When consciousness desired to experience its own infinity, it manifested as multiplicity, light and shadow, sound and silence, male and female. From this polarity came the universe, endlessly expanding, endlessly returning. Thus, in the dance of Shiva and Shakti, every act of creation is both divine play and divine remembrance. Tantra does not see the world as illusion, it sees it as expression. The body is not a prison, but a vessel through which awareness discovers itself. Every sensation, every emotion, every breath, is a doorway. In denying them, one remains asleep. In embracing them with awareness, one awakens. The tantric path is the art of transmutation, turning experience into realization, the mundane into the sacred. The traveler feels a shiver move through him, not of cold but of recognition. The temple is alive with symbols, lotus, serpent, flame, wheel, each a cipher for energies within himself. The yoni represents the gateway of creation, the endless womb of Shakti. The lingam stands for Shiva, the axis of stillness around which the universe turns. Together they symbolize the cosmic union, not of flesh, but of essence. In their balance lies the secret of harmony. He remembers the words of an old sage, when Shiva and Shakti unite, the world disappears, what remains is pure awareness. It is this awareness that the temples were built to awaken, not through worship, but through experience. The carvings, the geometry, the very arrangement of space, all are designed to attune the mind to this rhythm, to lead the seeker inward toward the still flame at the center of being. The air grows warm as sunlight spills through the arches. Dust motes shimmer like particles of eternity. The traveler watches them drift and realizes that even in their motion there is stillness. This is the essence of Tantra, to find the unmoving within movement, the eternal within change. The lovers on the walls, forever joined yet frozen in time, embody this truth. They are the dance of opposites in perfect balance, the meeting point of all dualities. In the tantric vision, union is not an act but a state of being. It is the recognition that there was never separation to begin with. Shiva and Shakti are not two, they are one essence seen from different perspectives, consciousness and its reflection, the observer and the observed. The human soul, caught between the two, is both witness and participant, both dreamer and dream. The traveler begins to see this unity everywhere, in the symmetry of the temple, in the balance of light and shadow, in the breath entering and leaving his lungs. The universe seems to inhale and exhale with him. In this moment, the sacred is no longer distant. It is here, in the heartbeat, in the silence between thoughts, in the warmth of the air. The divine is not above, it is within. Tantra teaches that liberation is not escape from life, but awakening within it. When one sees the world as divine play, lila, suffering dissolves into wonder. Every experience, even pain, becomes part of the cosmic dance. The traveler understands that the carvings on the temple walls are not moral lessons but mirrors of life's totality, joy and sorrow, passion and peace, all embraced without judgment. In this acceptance lies freedom. As evening falls, a golden haze envelopes the temple. The air hums with invisible resonance, the sound of Aum, the vibration that holds the universe together. The traveler sits beneath a carved arch and watches as the last light fades from the stones. The faces of gods and goddesses soften into shadow, their expressions serene, eternal. In their silence, he hears the message of Tantra. Do not flee from life. Enter it fully. For in every breath, every union, every act of creation, the divine reveals itself anew. The night gathers. The wind carries a low, unending hum, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The traveler closes his eyes, and for a brief, timeless instant, he feels the union of opposites within him, the stillness of Shiva, the movement of Shakti, consciousness witnessing itself through the body. He feels infinite and intimate all at once, the cosmos breathing through him, the divine looking through his eyes. And in that breath of realization, he understands what the ancients carved into stone, that the body is not the barrier to the sacred, it is the doorway. Night has fallen over the temple plain. The air is thick with the perfume of jasmine and wet stone. Somewhere in the darkness, a bell trembles, its note suspended between earth and sky. The traveler remains seated where twilight left him, eyes half closed, body still, breath slow. The carvings around him have disappeared into shadow, but he can feel them, every curve, every silent gesture, breathing through the air like remembered motion. It is as if the stone itself has turned inward, whispering its own dream. In the darkness, a truth begins to unfold. The temple is not built of stone, it is built through consciousness. Each block was laid in harmony with the rhythms of the body and the cosmos. The spire mirrors the spine, the sanctum the heart. The architect knew that to construct a house for the divine, one must first understand the architecture of the human being. The traveler senses this alignment as he sits, the vertical rise of energy, the widening circle of awareness. The structure outside becomes a reflection of the structure within. A faint wind moves through the corridors, carrying the sound of distant chanting. The syllables are ancient, untranslatable, but their resonance feels familiar. They do not mean, they are. The voice of the mantra is the pulse of the universe remembering itself. Aum Namah Shivaya. 6 sounds, rising and falling like waves of breath. The traveler repeats them silently. With each repetition, something softens inside him, some boundary erodes. The noise of the world fades, and in its place comes a slow, luminous stillness. Tantra calls this stillness Mahasukha, the great joy. It is not emotion, but recognition, the moment when awareness beholds itself and knows there is no other. To reach it, one must pass through layers of self and shadow, through attachment and fear, through the endless play of thought. The journey is inward, yet it mirrors the universe's own unfolding, from formlessness to form and back again. The traveler senses that he has walked this path many times, in other lives, in other worlds. Every birth is an echo of the same cosmic pulse. In that stillness arises a subtle light, not from the eyes but from within the spine, a thread of quiet fire. The texts call it Kundalini, the coiled one. But here, in experience, it feels less like a serpent and more like dawn breaking under the skin. It rises in spirals, unhurried, dissolving knots of tension, washing the mind in gold. Each center it touches blooms like a flower remembering the sun. Sound becomes color, breath becomes rhythm, body becomes space. When the light reaches the crown of the head, the traveler feels no explosion, only expansion, as if the sky itself has entered him. He remembers the carvings once more. Their still faces now seem alive with this same inner fire. The lovers upon the walls are not two beings joined in act but one consciousness unfolding itself in mirror form. Every embrace becomes a symbol for this rising energy, the marriage of heaven and earth within the human frame. The outer sculpture and the inner vision are the same teaching spoken in different languages. The traveler begins to understand why the ancients carved these mysteries into stone. Words fade, doctrine divides. But form endures. A curve, a gesture, a gaze can carry knowledge across millennia. The sculptors were not artisans alone, they were mystics preserving vibration. Each figure is a syllable in a sentence too vast to be spoken, yet instantly recognized by the awakened heart. The temple is a library of stone, and every relief is a page of living scripture. Outside, clouds drift across the face of the moon. Silver light slides over the temple's spire, revealing patterns of geometry, circles within squares, triangles balanced upon air. These shapes repeat inside the traveler's mind. He recalls the yantras of ancient practice, diagrams used not to represent the divine, but to invite it. To gaze upon a yantra is to enter it, to allow the pattern to rearrange one's inner landscape until observer and symbol become one. The temple itself is the largest of these yantras, built for the soul to walk through. Within this vast geometry, Tantra offers a lesson about polarity. Every force in the universe has its complement, the sun and the moon, inhalation and exhalation, movement and rest. The goal is not to favor one over the other, but to find the point of equilibrium where both dissolve into unity. In meditation, this is felt as the space between breaths, the moment when the body neither takes nor releases, when existence holds itself in perfect poise. The traveler lingers in that pause, sensing how creation and dissolution hinge upon the same silence. From this silence arises compassion. Not the sentiment that pities or clings, but the quiet understanding that everything is oneself in another form. The tantric texts say, when you see another, see your own self, when you hear another, hear your own breath. The traveler understands this now. The world is the body of Shakti, the awareness that beholds it is Shiva. To harm one is to wound the other, to love one is to worship both. The sacred union is not limited to the temple, it breathes in every act of kindness, every moment of presence. He opens his eyes. The first hint of dawn glows on the horizon, painting the carvings in pale gold. The temple seems to awaken with him. Birds stir in the rafters, and somewhere a conch shell sounds, announcing morning. The traveler rises slowly, feeling the echo of stillness within motion. Each step across the stone floor is deliberate, like a prayer. He realizes that enlightenment is not a destination but a manner of walking. To move through the world with awareness is to remain in the sacred union. Outside, the fields shimmer with dew. The air carries the scent of new beginnings. The traveler turns once more toward the spire, hands folded. He no longer seeks understanding, he embodies it. The mystery of Tantra cannot be solved, only lived. Its purpose is not to explain the divine but to awaken the recognition that the divine has always been here, breathing, dreaming, creating through every one of us. The bell sounds again, softer this time, like a heartbeat returning to rest. The traveler smiles. The long night of questioning has become a dawn of knowing. The sacred union endures, not in ritual, not in doctrine, but in the quiet meeting of awareness and life, of stillness and motion, of consciousness and form. And as he steps into the morning light, the temple behind him seems to breathe, the carvings shimmering as though alive. The gods and goddesses carved in stone remain eternally intertwined, reminding all who enter that the universe itself is a lover's embrace, endless, gentle, and profoundly awake. Morning spreads across the plains like a veil of pale gold. The traveler follows a narrow path away from the temple, its spires receding behind him, dissolving into mist. Yet even as distance grows, he feels the structure inside him, the rhythms of stone and spirit woven into breath. Ahead lies another landscape, not of temples, but of time, the age when strangers arrived from distant seas and looked upon these carvings with eyes unprepared for what they saw. The year is 1800 and something. The monsoon wind smells of ink and ship tar. In Calcutta, a new empire catalogues a world it barely understands. Surveyors and scholars, armed with notebooks and cameras, move across the subcontinent, measuring, sketching, translating. They call it discovery, yet what they seek is not meaning but mastery, names to fill maps, artifacts to fill museums, and words to frame the unfamiliar within familiar hierarchies. When they reach the temples of Khajuraho, Konark, and Bhubaneswar, their pens falter. The stone bodies bewilder them. They see abundance where restraint was expected, bodies where angels should have been. Their language turns uncertain, then moral, lascivious, obscene, depraved. The traveler, drifting unseen through this memory, hears their voices echo through the corridors of time like insects trapped in amber. To them, the sacred geometry appears as excess, the dance of energy as indulgence. They photograph what they cannot feel, classify what they cannot comprehend. In their ledgers, divinity becomes data. And so begins a long misunderstanding, the moment when the gaze of the colonizer refracts the mirror of the divine. To maintain the order of empire, the world must be divided, the civilized and the primitive, the moral and the sensual, the West and the rest. The temples, which once embodied unity, are forced into the vocabulary of separation. Their carvings become curiosities, their meanings exiled into silence. The traveler walks among these early chroniclers unseen. He watches an English antiquarian trace his gloved finger along a weather-worn figure of a goddess. The man flinches, as if the touch burns. Later, in his journal, he writes of licentious detail unfit for Christian eyes. Yet behind the tremor of disgust lies fascination, a tremor of something deeper, unacknowledged. The goddess carved in stone seems to look back at him, unblinking, ancient, unashamed. For the people of the land, these were not idols of lust but scriptures of life. Yet in the new discourse of empire, the local tongue grows hesitant. Priests close the inner sanctums. Artisans stop carving. The living tradition turns cautious, self-conscious beneath the foreign gaze. What was once sung becomes whispered, what was once celebration becomes secrecy. The traveler feels the shift as a subtle dimming of light, the cosmic balance tilting toward shame. By mid-century, missionaries published pamphlets condemning Hindu immorality, using temple imagery as proof of a fallen civilization in need of salvation. Sculptures are defaced, sometimes hidden behind plaster. In certain places, villagers bury fragments of stone to protect them from desecration. The goddess goes underground, waiting for another age to remember her. The traveler senses her patience, the calm of the earth that knows seeds must sometimes sleep before they flower again. Meanwhile, in London's museums, the same fragments gleam beneath glass. Scholars debate their aesthetic value, stripped of context. To the Victorian mind, beauty must be separated from the body, spirit from matter, art from experience. The tantric understanding, that the two are inseparable, sounds to them like heresy. Thus the sacred is recast as superstition, and the erotic as evidence of moral decay. The stones that once whispered of unity are made to testify for division. Yet history has its undercurrents. Even as the empire writes its narratives, another kind of seeing begins to stir among a few, artists, poets, travelers weary of the industrial age. They sense that these temples speak of something lost in their own world, a memory of holiness within flesh, of reverence that does not fear touch. They cannot fully name it, but they feel its absence. The traveler lingers beside them, invisible companion to their curiosity. In their yearning he hears the faint beginning of reversal, the first crack in the glass of empire's certainty. Back in India, a quiet resistance grows. Scholars from within the tradition begin to reclaim their heritage, translating Sanskrit texts long dismissed as myth into philosophies of subtle precision. They show that the carvings are not indulgent scenes but cosmic metaphors, that the human form is the diagram of the universe itself. The traveler listens as their words gather strength, a slow return of dignity. But centuries of misunderstanding cannot be undone easily. The shadow of shame lingers, even as the lamps of knowledge are relit. As dusk falls over the scene of memory, the traveler stands once more before the temple, half ruined, half restored. The moon rises behind scaffolding, hammers ring against stone where artisans carve again after generations of silence. The air smells of dust and rain. Each stroke of the chisel is a heartbeat of reclamation. The carvings emerging from the rock seem gentler now, less dramatic, as if they, too, have learned patience through exile. Yet beneath their serenity burns the same truth: the sacred cannot be defiled by perception, it merely waits for eyes that can see. He realizes that the colonial gaze did not destroy the essence of these temples, it only blinded itself to them. For what is obscenity but the refusal to see holiness where it truly resides? The traveler breathes deeply. The sound of the hammer fades into the rhythm of his pulse, merging centuries into a single breath. The stones, the workers, the watchers, all are parts of one slow awakening. Somewhere within the half-repaired shrine, a lamp flickers. Its flame bends, straightens, bends again, as if nodding to every age that has tried to name it. The traveler watches the small light and hears the whisper of a timeless lesson: when truth is caged, it does not die, it becomes fragrance, waiting for the next wind to release it. The colonial gaze may have cast shadow, but the temples endure, patient, luminous, remembering. The dawn that follows is neither bright nor dim, but tempered, like light seen through old glass. The traveler walks through a city that was once the heart of empire and is now the heart of a country relearning its own reflection. Calcutta, Delhi, Madras, names whispered with the ache of memory. The British have left, but their shadows linger in the institutions they built: museums filled with the bones of forgotten gods, libraries lined with mistranslations, classrooms echoing with the accents of distant authority. The traveler enters one such museum, its corridors cool, silent, and heavy with time. Behind glass cases, fragments of temples lie like relics: hands without arms, torsos without faces, gazes broken mid-gesture. Small plaques bear Latinized names, polite distances between object and observer. Erotic sculpture, circa 10th century. Unknown deity, sandstone. He pauses before a fragment, the curve of a hip, the hint of a lotus, and feels the same pulse that once moved through the living temple. The body may be broken, but the energy still hums, like a mantra that refuses to end. A museum guard approaches, his steps echoing softly. He glances at the sculpture and then at the traveler. "They say these were too indecent to show in England," he murmurs. "Now they are too sacred to touch here." His voice carries no bitterness, only the weariness of a man who has watched people look without seeing. The traveler nods. The paradox is perfect: what was once condemned for its passion is now entombed for its holiness. Both forms of blindness, mirror images of fear. Outside, the city stirs: rickshaw bells, bicycle spokes, vendors calling through the morning haze. The traveler drifts through it like smoke, listening. Everywhere he hears the same quiet struggle, a civilization trying to remember its body. The new age prizes progress, intellect, reason. But beneath the asphalt and neon, the old pulse still beats. In the gestures of a dancer, in the rhythm of Sanskrit recitation, in the scent of camphor at the temple gate, the sacred body breathes again, fragment by fragment. Scholars begin to return to the texts once dismissed as superstition. They read the Kama Sutra not as a manual of indulgence but as a treatise on aesthetics, psychology, and harmony. They revisit the Vedas, the agamas, the hymns to Shakti. In their rediscovery, the erotic and the divine cease to be enemies, they become partners in an eternal dialogue. A new generation writes about Kama as one of the four aims of life, alongside Dharma, Artha, and Moksha, pleasure, duty, prosperity, and liberation, the four threads of the same tapestry. The traveler listens as voices rise from lecture halls and printing presses, reclaiming what was nearly lost. Yet he senses that something deeper is required, not just translation, but transformation. The colonial gaze may have left its physical form, but it still lingers in the mind, teaching people to distrust their own bodies, to divide the sacred from the real. The work of liberation, he realizes, is not political but perceptual. To free a nation's soul, one must first free its sight. He travels again to Khajuraho. The road is different now, asphalt cutting through rice fields, buses humming past banyan trees. Tourists gather at the gates, cameras in hand, eyes wide with curiosity. The temples, once forgotten, now draw the world again. Guides recite their rehearsed stories, 9 centuries, Chandala dynasty, UNESCO heritage. The traveler moves past them quietly and enters alone. Inside, the air feels the same as it did in the dream of ages past, heavy, fragrant, humming. Sunlight slides across the carvings, bringing them to life. The lovers on the walls shimmer with a grace beyond time, neither inviting nor hiding, simply being. The traveler senses their patience, their quiet knowing that human eyes will one day outgrow fear. He stands before them as a witness not of scandal, but of return. He recalls the words of Rabindranath Tagore, who once wrote of these temples, "Here the language of stone surpasses the language of man." Tagore understood that these carvings are not about desire alone, they are about consciousness embodied, the eternal play of life. To see obscenity in them is to look at the ocean and see only salt. The traveler feels gratitude for every poet and mystic who kept this knowing alive through centuries of distortion, for every whisper that survived the din of judgment. He sits upon the temple steps as afternoon turns to gold. In the distance, the laughter of children mixes with the calls of birds. For the first time in generations, the temple is no longer a source of shame but of wonder. Schoolchildren sketch its figures, pilgrims light lamps at its base. The energy of reverence returns, tentative but real. It is as if the temple itself has exhaled after a long breath held in stone. And yet, within this renaissance, a question lingers: can modern eyes truly see as the ancients did? The traveler senses that the answer lies not in scholarship but in silence. The ancients did not carve to teach but to transmit. To stand before the temple was to be initiated through beauty itself. The modern world, eager to explain, forgets how to feel. The traveler closes his eyes and listens. The hum returns, the low vibration that once echoed through the cosmos. It rises from the stone, from the earth, from within. The same energy that once bewildered the colonizers now moves freely again, subtle, unashamed. In this hum, the traveler sees a larger pattern: civilizations rise and fall, perceptions cloud and clear, but truth remains intact beneath misunderstanding. The colonial gaze, though powerful, was only a passing shadow across the eternal face of consciousness. The sacred body needs no defense, it only waits for the world to rediscover its reflection. As dusk settles, the traveler walks to the edge of the temple grounds. Beyond the last row of carvings lies a field of grass where the ruins end and silence begins. Fireflies emerge, scattering light like fragments of forgotten scripture. He watches them and feels that the work of the temple continues, not in stone, but in perception, in every mind that chooses to see beauty where fear once saw sin. In the soft dark, he whispers a final blessing to the stones, that those who come after will not look through borrowed eyes, but their own, that they will see the divine not as something distant, but as the pulse of the living world. The wind rises in answer, brushing across the carvings, and for an instant, they seem to shimmer again, alive, awake, eternal. The traveler turns away, carrying the hum of the temple in his chest like a quiet flame. Behind him, the night deepens, and the ancient stones glow softly under the stars, waiting for those who will see, at last, not obscenity nor idol, but the universe remembering itself in the shape of human form. The traveler rises before dawn, the horizon a pale line of liquid silver over the hills. The air carries the scent of wet earth, a fragrance that seems older than memory, older than time itself. He walks slowly toward a river that coils through the landscape, its surface shimmering like polished bronze. The water moves neither fast nor slow, yet it carries the feeling of eternity, the patient flow of energy, the subtle hum of creation, the quiet insistence that life is both transient and infinite. He pauses at the bank, watching ripples form and dissolve. Each movement is a lesson, nothing is wasted, nothing is meaningless. Tantra had taught him this, the body and spirit are not in conflict, but complementary. The pulse of desire and the stillness of consciousness are two threads of the same pattern, and only when woven together can life be whole. Eros without moksha becomes indulgence, moksha without eros becomes void. Only their union brings the fullness that the ancients carved into stone and sang into him. The temples, he realizes, were the first texts of this teaching. Their carvings, their architecture, their alignment with cardinal directions, with sunrise and solstice, are not decorative but didactic. They show the human journey, the awakening of desire, the cultivation of discipline, the rising of awareness, the merging with the eternal. Each step along the temple's path mirrors a step in the soul's ascent. The outer courtyard reflects the world of the senses, the inner sanctum reflects the inner world of spirit, the spire reflects consciousness unbound. He walks barefoot along a narrow path, feeling the texture of the earth beneath his feet. Each grain, each pebble, carries history. He recalls the agamas, the ancient texts that guided temple construction. They instructed not only the proportion of walls and towers, but the symbolic resonance of every gesture, every curve, every empty space. The temple was a living instrument, designed to awaken awareness through the body's own subtle perception. The ancients understood that sight, touch, and movement could convey truths that words often fail to capture. Desire, or kama, is the first lesson. It is energy itself, the force that moves the seed into soil, the tide into shore, the thought into action. In human form, it manifests as longing, as attraction, as the pulse of life that insists on growth and connection. The carvings on temple walls are maps of this energy, lovers entwined not merely for pleasure, but as symbols of the cosmic union of principles, masculine and feminine, active and receptive, consciousness and energy. In every curve and arc, the ancients encoded the lesson that creation begins in embrace, in interaction, in harmony of forces. Yet Eros alone is not the goal. The traveler remembers the inner sanctum of the temples, where stillness dominates, where statues of deities sit in meditation, eyes half closed, hands in mudra. Here, the flame of desire is transformed into light. The same energy that moves the body upward now moves the soul inward. Moksha is the recognition that the wave and the ocean are not separate, that the pulse of life is not apart from the stillness that witnesses it. It is not denial, nor suppression, but transmutation, the sacred art of converting motion into presence. He sits by the river, tracing the flow with his gaze. Life, he realizes, is a mirror of the temple, cycles within cycles, opposites within unity. Desire propels, awareness guides, sensation informs, insight transcends. To ignore one is to disrupt the balance, to embrace both is to awaken. In this understanding lies a subtle joy, Mahasukha, the great happiness born not of indulgence, but of harmony. It is the joy that ancient poets attempted to capture in hymn and sculpture, the joy that can be glimpsed only when the self observes without resistance, when body and spirit move in accord. The traveler reflects on the many pilgrims who have walked these paths, many centuries before him. Some came seeking liberation, some pleasure, some knowledge. All found the same truth, that the human experience is sacred because it participates in the cosmic play. The temples themselves were teachers, silent yet eloquent, reminding all who entered that life is not to be divided into sacred and profane, but to be embraced fully, consciously, reverently. The sun rises higher, and the traveler notices how its light interacts with the landscape, creating shadows that dance across the earth like living scripture. He recalls the principle of yoga, the union of opposites, and realizes that all forms of practice, all disciplines, all art and meditation, are designed to awaken the same awareness. The sacred is not a place or an image, it is the recognition of unity in multiplicity, the alignment of the finite with the infinite. He begins to walk along the riverbank, each step measured, deliberate, mindful. The water reflects the sky, and in it he sees himself reflected, body and soul intertwined, desire and awareness coexisting. The ancient philosophers wrote of Purusha and Prakriti, consciousness and matter, dancing together in an eternal embrace. The carvings, the hymns, the rituals were all reminders of this dance, teaching that liberation is not withdrawal, but participation with understanding. Along the way, the traveler finds a cluster of stones, remnants of a forgotten shrine. Moss grows over them, and small insects move in patterns of quiet symmetry. He sits among them, feeling the continuity of life. Time folds upon itself. He can sense the hands of sculptors long gone, the breath of poets long silent, the pulse of worshippers long dispersed. All converge in the present moment, in the same river, the same sun, the same rhythm of heart and breath. Eros and moksha are not two, they are reflections of the same principle. Desire is the spark, liberation is the flame. Together, they illuminate the path of life. Without Eros, the flame cannot rise, without moksha, the spark is wasted. The ancients carved this wisdom into stone, sang it into chants, inscribed it into rhythm, ensuring that those who approached with openness would be initiated into the mystery of balance. The traveler lies back on the earth, feeling the warmth of sunlight, the coolness of shade, the gentle pulse of air. He closes his eyes and lets the principles of the ancients flow through him, the embrace of energy, the stillness of awareness, the continuity of life. The temples, the rivers, the texts, and the hymns converge in a single experience, a meditation without words, a lesson without instruction, a revelation without ceremony. And in this state, he hears the unspoken truth that life, like the temples, is a mandala, a pattern of cycles, opposites, and harmonies. The carvings of lovers and gods are not merely art, they are a mirror of existence itself. The pulse of Eros moves outward, creating connection, action, and growth. The stillness of moksha moves inward, observing, transforming, uniting. The human experience, when lived with awareness, becomes the conduit through which the universe remembers itself. As evening approaches, the traveler rises once more. The river flows endlessly, the stones are warm beneath his feet, and the wind carries whispers of age-old knowledge. He understands that the forgotten balance of life is always present, waiting to be recognized, experienced, and honored. Desire and liberation, body and spirit, movement and stillness, they are threads in the same tapestry, and the temples, the carvings, and the texts are the loom upon which it is woven. He watches the sun set, casting golden light across the water. Shadows stretch, bend, and fold into each other, reminding him that life is never fixed but always in motion, always returning. He breathes with the rhythm of the world, feeling the continuity of existence, the sacred flow of energy, the infinite embrace of the eternal. The traveler whispers a final recognition into the evening air, that the balance of Eros and moksha is not a doctrine to learn, but a state to inhabit. To live fully is to witness desire without attachment, to embrace freedom without forsaking the body, to awaken within the dance of life itself. The temples were the first guides, the first teachers, and still, their lessons echo, waiting for every soul willing to listen, willing to feel, willing to merge presence with eternity. Night settles over the river, and the traveler remains at the bank, listening to the gentle pulse of water flowing over stone, over sediment, over centuries. The sound is neither hurried nor hesitant, it moves as life moves, as energy moves, as consciousness moves. Here, at the edge of the world, he contemplates the intertwining of Eros and moksha, the subtle rhythm that the ancients carved into every temple wall, every lotus petal, every gesture frozen in stone. Desire is not separate from liberation, nor liberation separate from desire. One cannot exist without the other, for the spark of passion illuminates the path to transcendence, while the still flame of awareness tempers and channels the spark. He closes his eyes and recalls the sculptures of Khajuraho, the carvings of Konark, the mosaics of Ellora. Lovers entwined, gods poised in meditation, animals in eternal motion, all are reflections of a cosmic principle, a subtle geometry that underlies the visible universe. The ancients understood that energy must move, and yet they also understood the necessity of its observation. The body, the breath, the gaze, all are instruments of the soul, tools to align with the rhythm of existence. To walk the path of life without this awareness is to see only fragments, to hear only echoes. The traveler rises, brushing the dew from his clothes, and steps onto a narrow path lined with ancient stones. Each step resonates, not just upon the earth, but within his own body, within the quiet chambers of perception. He feels the pulse of life moving through him, subtle, unbroken, continuous. In this pulse, he senses the wisdom of the temples, that human existence is a mandala of cycles, of union and separation, of desire and stillness. The carvings are not indulgence, but instruction, not sensuality alone, but the architecture of awareness. He remembers the first lesson of Eros, the spark of energy that drives life forward. It is visible in the yearning of lovers, in the artist's hand, in the dancer's leap. It is the creative principle that births forms from the formless, movement from stillness, life from potential. To deny Eros is to deny the river its flow, the sun its warmth, the seed its urge to grow. The ancients carved these lessons into stone to remind the world that energy is sacred, that longing is holy, and that the body is a vessel for awareness, not a vessel to be shamed. Yet moksha is the counterbalance, the stillness that allows the spark to illuminate without consuming. The traveler sits beneath a banyan tree, its roots tangled like the threads of existence, its leaves whispering with the wind. He breathes slowly, allowing the awareness of the body to expand inward, tracing the movement of energy through the spine, through the limbs, through the subtle body where light and breath intertwine. Moksha is not separation from the world, but recognition of its unity. It is the quiet knowing that every act of desire, every movement, every thought, is already part of the infinite web of consciousness. The temples encode this duality in their very form. The outer courtyards, open to the sun, are spaces of motion, of dance, of ritual. The inner sanctums, dark and cool, are spaces of reflection, of meditation, of stillness. The journey from one to the other mirrors the journey of life, outward into experience, inward into consciousness, upward into unity. The traveler sees the same pattern within himself, within the rhythm of his own breath, within the pulse of his own heart. Desire rises, energy flows, and awareness witnesses it all, transforming movement into insight. He walks along the river once more, observing the play of light on water. The reflections are not static, they shimmer, dissolve, reform. This is the same truth that the ancients carved into stone. Impermanence and permanence are not opposites, but layers of the same reality. The body is impermanent, the stone endures, yet both participate in the eternal rhythm. Energy moves, form solidifies, awareness observes. To understand the temples is to understand the dance of these forces, to see that eros without awareness is fire uncontrolled, and moksha without energy is emptiness. The traveler contemplates the human journey. From birth, life is a series of awakenings, the first breath, the first cry, the first act of recognition. Desire follows naturally, the urge to connect, to create, to grow. Yet from desire arises confusion, suffering, attachment. Without the guiding principle of awareness, the spark becomes a fire that consumes itself. Moksha, the ancients teach, is the cultivation of discernment, the gentle transformation of energy into wisdom, the alignment of body and spirit, the harmonization of the finite with the infinite. He thinks of the poets who came before, who sang of love and liberation intertwined. Their verses were not moral injunctions, but reflections of the human experience as sacred geometry. They taught that pleasure is not sin, nor transcendence denial. Both are dimensions of the same path. In the flicker of a candle, in the curve of a sculpted limb, in the breath of a chant, they inscribed the lesson: life is to be embraced fully, consciously, reverently. Night deepens, and stars emerge, mirrored in the river's surface. The traveler sits, gazing at the constellations, recognizing in their vast order the same pattern he has seen in temples, texts, and his own body. The universe itself is a temple, every atom a carving, every pulse a mantra. Desire and stillness, motion and observation, body and spirit, they are threads woven into a fabric that stretches from the first breath to the last, from the first carving to the final exhale. He allows himself to feel the fullness of this understanding. Desire rises, flows, and transforms. Awareness observes, softens, illuminates. The river, the stones, the trees, the air, the stars, and the temples, all resonate in harmony. The sacred balance of life, nearly forgotten through centuries of misunderstanding, emerges once more in consciousness. Eros is honored, moksha is honored, and together they reveal the path that humans have always sought, a life that is complete, awake, and aware. The traveler rises as dawn returns, feeling the continuity of existence within every motion. He walks along the riverbank, each step a meditation, each breath a mantra. The lessons of the temples, once nearly lost to history, are now alive within him, not as texts or images, but as experience. Desire moves with purpose, consciousness observes with clarity, and the dance of life continues, eternal and unbroken. And in this awakening, he understands the greatest truth of all, that the balance of eros and moksha is not a goal to reach, but a living presence to inhabit. Every moment of breath, every gesture, every pulse of energy is an opportunity to participate fully in the cosmic rhythm. The temples, the texts, the carvings, and the chants are not relics, they are instructions for life, eternal and immediate, waiting for any soul willing to listen, willing to see, willing to become the living mandala. The traveler pauses once more, closing his eyes. He feels the pulse of the world within himself, the quiet fire of awareness, the gentle surge of desire. In this balance, he perceives the forgotten truth that the ancients carved, painted, and sang, that life, in its totality, is sacred, that the body and spirit are one, that eros and moksha together reveal the full horizon of existence. And as he breathes in the cool morning air, he knows that this lesson will echo through time, like the eternal hum of the river, like the shimmer of moonlight on stone, like the slow, endless unfolding of consciousness itself. The traveler walks through a city alive with the hum of the present, yet threaded with echoes of centuries past. Streets shimmer with neon and sunlight, rickshaw bells blend with engine hums, and the air carries the faint fragrance of incense mixed with exhaust. This modern landscape is a palimpsest, each layer, ancient, colonial, contemporary, overlapping, waiting for those willing to read between the lines. It is here, in this space between eras, that the sacred gaze begins to return. Across the country, scholars, artists, and pilgrims have begun to look again at the temples, the carvings, and the texts, not with fear, nor with judgment, nor with the prying eyes of the colonial lens, but with reverence and curiosity. Museums and universities that once perpetuated misunderstanding now serve as bridges, revealing the symbolic depths that the West once dismissed as licentious or exotic. And in doing so, the world begins to relearn the language of the ancients, a language written not in words alone, but in form, rhythm, and perception. The traveler finds himself in a lecture hall, sunlight spilling across carved wooden panels that echo motifs from centuries-old temples. A modern scholar speaks softly, almost poetically, describing the geometry of desire and stillness encoded into Khajuraho's walls. The students listen with open minds, some sketching, others closing their eyes to feel the resonance of energy that the teacher describes. It is not knowledge for consumption, but initiation into seeing. The sacred and erotic are one, observation and experience are inseparable, the body and spirit are mirrors of cosmic principles. Outside the lecture hall, the city hums, but another rhythm has begun to awaken, slower, quieter, deeper. Dance schools teach classical movements that echo temple rituals. Artists study the gestures of sculpted figures, recreating the subtlety of expression in paint, clay, and film. Photographers linger on stone carvings, not to frame scandal, but to illuminate detail, balance, and intention. Pilgrims walk ancient temple paths once more, tracing steps that the hands of architects, sculptors, and devotees laid down in precision, in devotion, in love. The traveler observes a young couple at a restored temple, their fingers brushing as they read inscriptions. He senses that their awareness differs from that of the colonial visitor centuries before. They are not judging, not objectifying, not translating into fear or sin. They are observing. They are learning to see. In this act, the sacred gaze returns, not through authority, nor through control, nor through ownership, but through presence, through mindfulness, through recognition of energy, of pattern, of consciousness manifesting in form. Modern technology has allowed wider access, yet it risks dilution. Social media images, travel blogs, and hastily captioned photographs often flatten the depth into spectacle. Yet even here, the sacred pulse persists. Digital scholars, virtual pilgrims, and online communities begin to reinterpret texts and images, offering meditative insights, historical context, and symbolic explanations. The temple carved in stone centuries ago now finds new life in pixels, in quiet study, in shared reflection across continents. The sacred gaze, though challenged, multiplies. The traveler walks through the temple once again, stones beneath his feet warm from the afternoon sun. He runs his hand across carvings that depict human and divine figures entwined. In the quiet, he perceives layers of history, the devotion of sculptors, the misunderstanding of colonizers, the careful scholarship of modern interpreters, the awareness of contemporary pilgrims. Each layer adds depth, not confusion. Each perspective, when integrated, reconstructs a richer understanding. Here, in this multiplicity, the sacred gaze is reclaimed, not as possession, but as perception. He recalls the lesson of eros and moksha, energy and stillness, desire and transcendence, the sacred and the worldly, all exist as a continuum. The temples, through centuries of neglect, misinterpretation, and rediscovery, have remained faithful to this principle. They teach that true vision is holistic. One must feel, think, observe, and participate simultaneously. To see a carving is not merely to register form, but to sense its resonance in body, mind, and spirit, to feel the pulse of energy, to recognize the timeless principle encoded in matter. The sun begins to lower, casting elongated shadows across the temple courtyard. Children chase one another through the arches, their laughter echoing against walls carved with figures frozen in eternal motion. Tourists pause, cameras lowered, mesmerized by the interplay of light, shadow, and texture. In the soft haze of evening, the temple seems to breathe. The traveler senses the slow return of balance, the sacred gaze reawakening in human consciousness, carried not by doctrine, nor authority, nor fear, but by curiosity, reverence, and presence. Across the country, a subtle shift emerges. Scholars publish nuanced interpretations of tantric philosophy, highlighting its integration of desire, ethics, and liberation. Dancers reconstruct temple rituals, allowing audiences to experience the flow of energy once contained in stone and breath. Architects study proportions, realizing the universality of sacred geometry that informed ancient construction. The traveler notes that these efforts are not about reviving the past for nostalgia, but about illuminating principles that remain essential to living fully today: awareness, balance, and recognition of unity within duality. He sits upon a stone step as night falls. The sky, heavy with stars, mirrors the carvings above him, constellations intertwined, cosmic geometry reflected in human form. He breathes, and in that inhalation, he feels the pulse of centuries, the chisels of sculptors, the chants of priests, the judgments of colonizers, the inquiries of modern seekers. All merge into a single current, a river of awareness flowing through time, space, and perception. The sacred gaze, once clouded, emerges again, quiet, patient, luminous. The traveler rises, moving through shadowed corridors toward the temple spire. Each step is a meditation, a recognition that sacred perception is an active practice, not a passive observation. To reclaim it requires attention, humility, and reverence. It requires embracing the paradox that desire is divine and discipline is liberating, that body and spirit, pleasure and contemplation, history and presence, all participate in the same unfolding. The carvings, the chants, the rhythms, and the geometry are guides, not ends. The human observer becomes the bridge through which the sacred gaze flows once more. Distant drums echo across the courtyard, their cadence slow, steady, primal. The traveler follows the sound to a circle of modern practitioners, performing a ritual dance. Each movement mirrors gestures seen in stone centuries ago, spirals, arcs, reaches, bows. Energy circulates through the group, not for spectacle, not for vanity, but to embody awareness, to harmonize desire and stillness. The traveler observes, noting the continuity, the pulse of eros, tempered by the rhythm of moksha, flowing outward, inviting recognition, teaching the sacred gaze through experience rather than text. The temple, centuries old and alive, hums beneath the stars. Shadows stretch across the carved faces, emphasizing curves, angles, and expressions that once confounded outsiders. Yet now, the observer sees clearly, these are not mere figures, nor ornaments, nor provocations, they are lessons, invitations, maps of consciousness. The sacred gaze returns when one perceives beyond judgment, beyond fear, beyond division, when one sees energy as sacred, desire as natural, and life as a continuous expression of unity. And so, as night deepens, the traveler steps back from the spire. The carvings, the chants, the modern practitioners, and the soft wind all merge into a single meditation. He feels the lineage of perception, sculptors, priests, colonizers, scholars, pilgrims, seekers, all threads woven into the same fabric of awareness. The sacred gaze has been reclaimed, not as possession or approval, but as living recognition, the world, the body, the mind, and the divine intertwined in an eternal, conscious embrace. Night deepens, yet the traveler lingers among the ancient stones, feeling the resonance of centuries vibrating beneath his feet. The temple, though touched by time and modern restoration, still hums with energy, a subtle but constant reminder that sacredness is not bound by eras, dynasties, or empires. What was once misinterpreted, mocked, or feared is now seen with renewed clarity, a testament to the enduring capacity of perception to heal itself. The modern gaze, he notes, is not unchallenged. The world moves fast, images are flattened, experience condensed into snapshots, meaning reduced to captions. Yet even in this acceleration, fragments of sacred awareness persist. A photographer kneels before a sculpture, hesitating, camera lowered. In that pause, he witnesses the curvature of stone not as temptation but as metaphor. A student traces the outline of a goddess with her fingertips, feeling the pulse of creation, not merely recording it. In these moments, the sacred gaze flickers into life, fragile yet persistent, waiting for recognition. The traveler walks through the shadowed corridors of the temple. The carvings, once scorned by colonial eyes, now speak clearly to the present. Lovers entwined in stone, gods poised in meditation, animals frozen in eternal gesture, each figure is a lesson in the unity of opposites. Desire and stillness, motion and observation, energy and awareness, These dualities are not enemies but collaborators in the creation of consciousness. The traveler feels the subtle thrill of comprehension, the quiet hum of recognition that the sacred gaze requires patience, attentiveness, and humility. He recalls the generations of interpreters, both foreign and native, who shaped understanding across centuries. Some imposed fear and judgment, distorting meaning. Others preserved fragments, translating, documenting, and ultimately transmitting subtle truths. Modern scholars now piece these threads together, blending historical research with philosophical reflection and experiential practice. In lecture halls, studios, and sacred spaces, the principles embedded in stone are revived, not merely as historical curiosities, but as living guides. The traveler moves toward the central courtyard, where a modern ritual unfolds. Practitioners, young and old, move through gestures derived from ancient temple dances, their bodies aligned with the rhythms that sculptors once encoded into stone. Hands rise in spirals, feet trace arcs, torsos bend in wave-like motion. Energy flows through them, not for performance, not for spectacle, but as embodied meditation. Here, the sacred gaze is fully realized, awareness observing energy, recognition breathing life into form, consciousness witnessing its own manifestation. He notices a young child seated on a stone step, watching the dancers with wide eyes. The child does not judge, does not label, does not seek meaning in words. She absorbs, intuitively, the flow of energy, the harmony of motion, the rhythm of light and shadow. The traveler realizes that this is the essence of the sacred gaze, openness, presence, and the willingness to witness without preconception. The child sees the world with clarity not yet clouded by fear, convention, or habit. In this moment, the traveler reflects on the lessons of Eros and Moksha. Desire is celebrated, not shamed, stillness is honored, not suppressed. The pulse of life is acknowledged, the flow of energy embraced. The carvings, the chants, the dances, and the rituals converge to teach that sacredness is not external, but immanent, present in every movement, every thought, every breath. The temple is not merely architecture, it is a living curriculum in perception, a guide to harmonizing body, mind, and spirit. The evening deepens, and fireflies appear, flickering across the temple grounds like living sparks of insight. The traveler walks among them, each step a meditation on continuity. He perceives layers of time coexisting, sculptors chiseling stone, priests chanting hymns, colonial observers misunderstanding, modern seekers rediscovering. Each layer contributes to the ongoing unfolding of awareness. Sacredness, he realizes, is not static, it breathes, adapts, survives through recognition and reverence. He pauses beside a carved figure of a goddess, her posture poised, her gaze serene. The traveler feels the vibration of intention embedded in the stone, Eros and Moksha intertwined, energy and awareness unified, human form and cosmic principle mirrored. This figure, once mocked as lascivious, now radiates clarity. Its teaching is simple yet profound, life is a continuum, and only by perceiving fully, with heart, mind, and body, can one engage in its sacred dance. The temple's spire rises above him, silhouetted against the starlit sky. Each shadow, each reflection, each line of stone is a marker of continuity. The traveler senses that reclaiming the sacred gaze is not merely an intellectual exercise but an experiential practice. To look with presence, to witness without judgment, to allow energy and awareness to coexist, this is the act that transforms perception and restores meaning. He walks again along the river outside the temple, the water now reflecting moonlight instead of sun. The flow is constant, subtle, eternal. In its movement, he sees the principles of the temples mirrored, cycles within cycles, opposites within unity, desire tempered by stillness, energy observed by consciousness. He breathes with the rhythm of the water, attuning to its pulse, recognizing in it the same sacred geometry that guided temple construction and human understanding for millennia. In this reflective silence, he perceives a subtle shift. The sacred gaze has moved from the margins to the mainstream of consciousness. Across the world, people begin to see ancient erotic carvings not as scandal but as symbols of unity, not as indulgence but as instruction. The body is no longer feared, energy is no longer shamed, perception is reclaimed as a form of reverence. Scholars, artists, dancers, and seekers contribute to this awakening, creating a network of awareness that mirrors the patterns once inscribed in stone. The traveler stops and gazes at the temple's main sanctum. Inside, the deity sits in quiet meditation, eyes half closed, hands in gesture. Energy flows outward from the inner chamber, touching the courtyard, the river, the city, and the world beyond. The sacred gaze has been restored not by edict or decree, but by presence, recognition, and participation. It is fragile yet resilient, quiet yet luminous, subtle yet pervasive. Here, the lessons of centuries converge, eros and moksha, desire and stillness, body and spirit, past and present, observer and observed, all in harmonious alignment. As night deepens further, the traveler turns toward the horizon. The hum of life continues, the river, the wind, the footsteps of seekers, the echoes of ancient chants. In this symphony of continuity, he understands the ultimate teaching of the temples: sacredness is ever present, waiting for those who see without fear, who observe without judgment, who feel without attachment. The sacred gaze is not recovered through possession or comprehension alone, but through inhabiting presence fully, reverently, attentively. He breathes in the cool night air, the rhythm of the temple, the pulse of history, and the flow of consciousness. The carvings, the dances, the rituals, the texts, all converge in this living experience. The sacred gaze is complete, reclaimed, not as a curiosity of the mind, but as a meditation of perception, a lived recognition of unity, a conscious participation in the eternal dance of life. The traveler stands and whispers a quiet acknowledgement to the stones, the river, the moon, and the stars, that sacred perception endures, that human awareness can return to harmony, that the lessons of eros and moksha, of desire and liberation, of energy and stillness, are eternal. The temple hums in response, a subtle vibration that resonates through body, mind, and spirit, reminding all who come after that the sacred gaze is not a relic of the past, but a living, breathing path, open to any who dare to see with presence and reverence. The night stretches endlessly, soft and deep, as though the world itself has exhaled after centuries of expectation and misinterpretation. The traveler stands once more at the edge of a temple, the stones beneath his feet warm from the memory of centuries, cool with the weight of time. Around him, the air is dense with subtle hums, the resonance of countless footsteps, chants, gestures, and gazes imprinted upon the very architecture, lingering like a river of consciousness flowing beneath and around the corporeal world. He closes his eyes and breathes in slowly, sensing layers of history and energy coexisting in silence. Here, the temples speak in whispers, in vibrations, in shadows and sunlight, offering lessons not through instruction, but through presence. Every carving of lovers and deities, every animal frozen mid-motion, every curve, every arc, every empty space is a syllable of a language older than memory, a language meant to teach perception itself. It is a language that transcends time, one that requires only attention, openness, and patience. The traveler recalls the colonial era, when fear and misunderstanding clouded human sight. Foreign eyes, unprepared for the language of stone, imposed morality and shame where only teaching had been intended. Obscenity was projected onto sacred form, beauty was dismissed as temptation. For centuries, the sacred pulse lay dormant, misread, misnamed, misprized. Yet the temple endured, patiently awaiting the return of those who would perceive with reverence, who would see energy as divine, who would recognize desire and stillness as complementary currents flowing through all existence. He feels the hum of the carvings beneath his hands, subtle and persistent. In each figure, he senses the duality of eros and moksha, the perpetual dance of desire and liberation. Lovers entwined not merely for pleasure, but as symbols of cosmic union, of masculine and feminine principles, of energy and consciousness, of body and spirit. The pulse of human longing is rendered sacred through form, through rhythm, through geometry, through breath. The temple teaches that creation begins in embrace, yet finds completion in awareness. The traveler walks slowly along the temple grounds, stepping over thresholds, pausing in courtyards, feeling the movement of air over carved stone. He observes the modern pilgrims and students, their gazes unburdened by fear, their hands tracing inscriptions lightly, their minds receptive to subtle energies. Some sketch, some meditate, some move and dance, all participate in the continuum of perception, the reclamation of the sacred gaze. They embody the principle the ancients encoded, that sacredness is not in obedience, nor in fear, nor in judgment, but in mindful presence. He sees how time has layered itself upon the temples, the chisels of artisans, the whispers of devotees, the misunderstandings of colonizers, the insights of modern scholars, the curiosity of contemporary visitors. All converge in this space, not in conflict, but in a tapestry of consciousness. Here, history is not linear, it is a spiral, a mandala, a river of awareness folding upon itself. The sacred gaze emerges in these folds, delicate, luminous, resilient, a reminder that perception, once awakened, persists across generations. The traveler reflects on the principles of eros and moksha. Desire is energy, creative, potent, essential. It flows through the body, moves the mind, calls the soul to growth and connection. Yet without the tempering flame of awareness, without the quiet recognition of stillness, desire risks becoming consumption, attachment, or distraction. Moksha, the transmutation of energy into insight, the union of motion and observation, the merging of form and consciousness, restores balance. Life, as the temples teach, is a continuous negotiation between these currents. The carvings, chants, and rituals are the guidance, the embodied curriculum in human experience. He recalls the rivers he has walked along, their waters reflecting the sky and the temple carvings alike. Their flow mirrors the lessons of human perception, ceaseless, patient, reflective, subtle. The past moves into the present, awareness illuminates desire, observation transforms experience, and the sacred is ever present for those who choose to witness. Even in modern cities, amid asphalt and neon, the pulse persists. Scholars, artists, dancers, and pilgrims reconnect with this subtle force, allowing the sacred gaze to awaken within contemporary life. The traveler steps into a shadowed inner sanctum. The deity within sits in quiet meditation, its eyes half closed, hands forming mudras of subtle instruction. Energy circulates outward, touching the carvings, the courtyards, the river, the city, and beyond. Here, desire and stillness meet in perfect harmony. Eros is honored, moksha is honored, and both are inseparable threads in the pattern of being. He sits before the deity, aligning breath with pulse, mind with form, heart with hum, surrendering to the quiet current that courses beneath the surface of perception. He recalls the modern era's role in this reclamation. Scholars document, dancers embody, teachers interpret, seekers meditate. Social media and digital technology allow the principles encoded in stone to reach minds far beyond the original temples. Yet the traveler understands that the sacred gaze cannot be mediated solely by images or words. It requires presence, embodiment, attention. The temples, in their enduring wisdom, are guides, not manuals. They teach that perception itself is a practice, that to see the sacred is to inhabit it, that to reclaim the gaze is to harmonize one's own energy with awareness. The traveler feels the subtle hum intensify, as though the stones themselves breathe in recognition. He envisions the generations of those who have walked these grounds, sculptors carving with devotion, priests chanting with precision, colonizers observing with misunderstanding, modern seekers returning with curiosity. Each layer contributes to the living continuum of consciousness. Sacredness is not fragile, it is persistent, waiting for recognition. Awareness is the key, observation is the doorway, reverence is the path. He rises and steps into the courtyard where modern dancers continue their ritual. Their movements are deliberate yet fluid, echoing centuries of temple gestures. Hands spiral, torsos undulate, feet trace arcs in quiet meditation. The traveler senses the continuity of the sacred gaze, the energy flows, the awareness observes, and consciousness witnesses itself. Desire and stillness are integrated, eros and moksha entwined, body and spirit in quiet harmony. The lessons of the ancients, once misunderstood, now find living expression. The traveler walks to the edge of the temple complex, where grass meets river. Fireflies scatter their ephemeral light across the ground. Each flicker, each movement, is a reminder that sacredness exists in impermanence, in subtlety, in presence. Life itself becomes a temple, each breath a ritual, each gesture a mantra. The pulse of energy is inseparable from awareness. The observer and observed merge in a quiet, luminous dance. The sacred gaze, once obscured, has returned. He sits beside the river, reflecting on the journey he has witnessed, the birth of temples, the encoding of knowledge into stone, the colonial gaze that misunderstood, the modern reclamation that restores perception, the subtle currents of eros and moksha that persist in all forms of being. The traveler feels that these currents are eternal, flowing through every generation, every form, every consciousness. They are not lost, they have only awaited recognition. Stars scatter across the night sky, mirrored in the river's surface. The traveler breathes with their rhythm, aligning himself with the continuity of life. Desire rises and flows, awareness observes and transforms. The temples, the carvings, the chants, the rituals, the modern practitioners, the observers, all converge in a single, living meditation. Sacredness is present, immanent, luminous. The gaze, once clouded, is now clear. He whispers into the night, a quiet benediction, may those who come after see with presence, feel with clarity, perceive without judgment. May desire be honored, stillness revered, life lived fully, consciously, harmoniously. The temples are not relics, they are living teachers. The carvings are not ornaments, they are lessons. The sacred gaze is not recovered through judgment, fear, or moralizing, but through embodiment, attention, and reverence. The river hums beneath the moonlight, the wind carries whispers across the courtyard, and the fireflies pulse like subtle mantras. The traveler closes his eyes and allows the convergence of centuries, energies, and consciousness to flow through him. Here, at the edge of time and perception, he witnesses the eternal truth. Sacredness endures, energy persists, awareness illuminates, and life, in its totality, is a living mandala of eros and moksha, of desire and liberation, of body and spirit, of observer and observed. The night deepens into stillness. The traveler feels the infinite continuity of existence flowing through every element, stones, rivers, air, stars, humans, deities, energy, consciousness. Sacredness is not elsewhere, it is now, in this breath, this step, this heartbeat. The temples whisper, the carvings hum, the rivers sing. Every act of observation, every meditation, every act of presence becomes a restoration of the sacred gaze, a recognition that life itself is the eternal temple, the eternal lesson, the eternal dance. The traveler rises one final time, leaving the temple grounds with a sense of quiet completion. The night remains soft and deep. The river continues its flow, carrying reflections of stars and carvings alike. The sacred gaze persists, luminous, patient, eternal. Desire and stillness, motion and observation, eros and moksha, all are one, flowing in quiet, radiant harmony. And in this infinite unfolding, he understands that the lesson of the temples, the carvings, the chants, the rivers, and the stars is not lost. Sacredness endures through perception, awareness restores balance, and the human gaze, when reclaimed, becomes a conduit for eternity itself.